it's better. Thank you.
Yeah. Many studies on animals have shown that the rare earth elements can cause several types of toxicity, such as oxidative stress, toxicity on organs like lung and liver, damage in systems such as the growth and reproduction system, or they can be bioaccumulated. So we decided to elaborate an investigation about the toxicity of the rare earth elements on three different levels: on human biomonitoring by analyzing their content on human samples, their environmental toxicity by elaborating ecotoxicity trials in the lab, and their environmental background by analyzing their content on specific areas. Let's see about the first level of investigation, the human biomonitoring. We decided to investigate the occupational exposure of the rare earth elements to car repair workers. And why did we choose this category of workers? Because as we said before, also Dr. Pagano said, the rare earth elements are used as additives on diesel fuels, and so these workers can get exposed through inhalation of the exhausts. So we collected urine and hair samples from two different plants in Avellino and Lake of Como in collaboration with the local agencies. On the first plant, which is located in Avellino near Naples, the workers do not use means of protection, and so we call them the cases. And on the second plant, which is located in Lake of Como in northern Italy, the workers are using means of protection, and so they are called the controls. We collected the 18 morning and 18 evening urine and 19 hair samples from Avellino workers, and 82 urine and 40 hair samples from workers from Lake of Como. All experimental protocols were approved by the Ethics Committee of the University of Naples, Federico II. For preparing our urine samples, we tried and compared three different methods: a simple dilution 1:5 with 2% of nitric acid, a digestion overnight with ultra-pure nitric acid, and a digestion with an open assisted acid digestion system with ultra-pure of nitric acid. For our hair samples, we tried only one method. We first washed our samples with the sequence water, acetone water on a sonicator system. Then we dried them at 80 degrees overnight. We cut them at small pieces of 5 to 10 centimeters. And then we digested them in ultra-pure nitric acid at 80 degrees on a hot scale. The determination of the content of the rare earth elements was elaborated by ICP-MS on high sensitivity mode. Before analyzing our samples, it was essential to determine the limits of detection and limits of quantification for both the instrument and the matrices. For that, we analyzed the content of the rare earth elements on 10 blank samples that contained only 2% of nitric acid. And the load and log values were calculated as 3 and 10 times, respectively, of the standard deviation of the measured concentrations. In order to be sure that the methods we use are reliable, we validated two methods of preparation of urine samples. And since there are no certified reference materials of human urines for rare earth elements, we spiked urine matrices with known concentrations of an analyte standard at 3 different levels: at low level with 0.5 micrograms per liter, at medium level with 5 micrograms per liter, and at high level with 50 micrograms per liter. Both methods showed adequate precision of repeatability and intra-laboratory reproducibility. And as you can see in our diagrams for low, medium, and high level, the recoveries of the rare earth elements for both methods were very close to 100% for all levels. So we analyzed the content of the rare earth elements on our samples, and we found that there are significantly higher concentrations of the rare earth elements on the urines of the workers of Avellino, comparing all three methods. Instead, on our hair samples, the concentrations were not significantly different between the two groups, except for lanthanum and cerium, which were significantly higher in cases. And in the laboratory, we're going to elaborate also statistical analysis about the association of the rare earth elements with smoking. We determined also the levels of creatinine and 1-hydroxypyrene in our urine samples, and we found out that they are both significantly higher on the urines of Avellino workers, so we can assume that the workers of Avellino are more exposed to the car exhausts with respect to the workers of Lake of Como. And all these results we have prepared and submitted a scientific paper about that, which is under review for the moment. We did also a literature review about the toxicity of the rare earth elements on human health, and we found that the hair is the most studied biological matrix and cerium the most studied rare earth element. There are several ways of exposure to the rare earth elements, like environmental, due to lifestyle, occupational, or through the food chain. The exposure to the rare earth elements has been associated with several diseases like neural tube defects, anemia, or endomyocardial fibrosis. And the lifestyle, like smoking and drinking, would contribute to increase the exposure to the rare earth elements. Let's see about the second level of investigation, which is the environmental toxicity of the rare earth elements. As I said before, to investigate environmental toxicity, we elaborate ecotoxicity trials in the lab. And in order to elaborate a trial, we first have to define which organism we would like to use, which rare earth element we would like to test, in which range of concentrations, and of course which endpoint we would like to see, like the bioaccumulation or the AC50 or the growth inhibition. This is a summary of all the ecotoxicity trials that we have elaborated until now during the Panorama project. And every time that we elaborate an ecotoxicity trial, we measure also the real concentration in our samples compared to the nominal concentration by ICP-MS on normal or high sensitivity mode, depending on the concentration we are analyzing. In this paper of ours, we compared the toxicity of cerium, gadolinium, lanthanum, and neodymium on a simulated acid mine discharge system to 3 photosynthetic organisms. And we saw that the low pH on 2 different pH at 4 and 6. And we saw that the low pH can increase the toxicity of the rare earth elements, while a higher pH could reduce their toxicity. This is another paper. We exposed for long term the photosynthetic organism Rhaphidocheirus subcapitata to lanthanum and cerium. And we found that low and lanthanum cerium concentrations can be slightly toxic to this algae, having the potential to be bioaccumulated and be transferred through the food web. We published also research about the toxicity of 8 rare earth elements to Phaeodactylum tricornutum. The AC50 values ranged from 0.98 to 13.21 milligrams per liter. And among these rare earth elements, gadolinium was the most toxic, while samarium was the less toxic. This is a big review that we have made, and it is under review for the moment, about the species sensitivity distribution of the rare earth elements. And according to this review of ours, algae seems to be the most affected group of species, considering most of the rare earth elements. And according to the HC5 values that we calculated, ytterbium seems to be the most toxic rare earth element for the environment, while praseodymium seems to be the less toxic. And let's see about the third level of investigation, which is the environmental background of the rare earth elements. For that, we collected samples from 3 abandoned mining sites of bauxite in the region of Puglia, which are Gargano, Otranto, and Spinazzola. We collected water, soil, sediments, rocks, and biota samples. And we are going to determine the levels of the rare earth elements on these samples by total XRF at the University of Hamburg and by ICP-MS at the University of Naples, and we're going to compare these two methods. In conclusions, both methods for preparing human urine samples are validated. There are significantly higher urine rare earth elements in Avellino workers. The rare earth elements in scalp here were not significantly different between the two groups. There are also significantly higher creatinine and 1-hydroxypyran levels in the urines of Avellino workers. And the rare earth elements seem to be toxic to several living organisms. This is a list of our papers that are already published, that are under review, and that are currently being written on the lab. Some references about the project, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antonio. So I don't know if we have maybe some questions from Antonio's and Giovanni's presentation. Don't be shy. Yes.
So why is one of your human study groups double the amount of the other group in number of donations?
Because this has to do with how many people wanted to volunteer in our research. We had many more volunteers in Lake of Como than Avellino.
But does this not cause like a shift in averages?
No, because wait. Here. Okay, so even with only 18 samples compared to the 82 urine samples of Lake of Como, we can have a good statistical analysis about our results, so they are publishable, for example. We don't have only 2 or 3 samples, but this depends on how many workers want to volunteer in our research. Is not in our hand.
How do you delimitate when it's enough, basically? Because you say 2 or 3 is not enough, but 18 is enough.
Yeah, but it depends also on how big the factory is, how big the plant is. So with this amount of samples, and according to the volunteers and according to the number of workers, we have a good, a reliable result.
I have a question about your samples.
I cannot hear.
Sorry. Is this the 18, like the 18 morning and evening samples, are they from the same day?
From the same day, the morning samples are before starting the job, the work, and the evening samples.
Okay.
So the theory is that we want to see if they are exposed during occupational exposure, and we saw some higher levels in the evening samples compared to the morning.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a question about, you said that you used 3 different protocols. You said you used 3 different protocols about the urine samples. Was that you saw different literature, and then at the end you chose only one out of three?
Yeah,
or
yes,
there-
these all methods are according to literature. They
Okay.
have been previously used, but we used all of them. We determined the content of the earth elements with all three methods.
And is there a big change among the three, like the results?
Yes, there are some changes. If I remember correctly, for example, with the last method of urine, the most abundant rare earth elements is samarium, while with the first one is cerium. But the medium value for the total rare earth elements in the end is more or less the same.
So you still keep all three of them, or at the end you choose just one to continue?
For the moment, I keep all of three for my
Okay.
project. Then we will see.
Okay.
Yep.
Concerning environmental toxicity, you said that rare earth had a different toxicity, right?
Here
In your SSD.
in the SSD, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so different rare earth have different toxicity. Do you have some explanations why they are different?
Why terbium, for example, is more toxic than praseodymium?
Yeah, you know.
That's a good question. So what we did for this review, we gathered all the literature about the toxicity of the rare earth elements to the living organisms. So I suppose on a specific research, many things play a role, like the pH that was used, or the species, the organism that was used.
Okay.
So for example, if you see here on our diagram, all the living organisms are included, so it doesn't have to do only with one specific animal. But in total, with our calculations, with the statistical analysis, comparing all these ecotoxicity trials, we found out that generally for the environment, terbium is the most toxic.
And was it always according measured concentration, or was it always nominal?
It is according to real concentrations only. Yes. Yes.
So in one of your slides you mentioned pH 4 and pH 6, and you mentioned like toxicity is higher at pH 4.
Yes.
So is it due to the acid that?
Yes, generally I have read also in other articles that generally the low pH can increase the toxicity of the rare earth elements.
Is it due to like they are more mobilized at low pH compared to at pH 6, or do you know why?
It has to do also with the properties of the metals that change in the lowest pH, but it has to do also with the organism that is used, I suppose, because the living organism does not act the same at pH 7, which is neutral, or at pH 4, which is acid.
Mm-hmm.
It's a combination with the sensitivity of the organism and the system and the properties of the metal.
Just a generic question. Here we are talking about the physical parameters that might influence the toxicity. Do you expect maybe, I don't know if there's any difference in the chemical structures or speciation that might have an effect on the toxicity? I have no idea.
I haven't thought for the moment about that. Because I think more or less all the rare earth elements have the same properties. They belong to the same group, so I haven't thought, maybe, I don't know. Yep.
Still about the pH actually, because I'm thinking like the pH 4 is 100 times acid than the pH 6.
Is what?
So with my experience, like the pH 4 is quite toxic already for the plant.
Mhm.
Do you think it's really from the rare earth or from the pH?
No, also,
Go on.
Okay, but I mean, in this case for this test, this is also why the control is in pH 4. So if your control is valid, then I mean, I think this were acute to test. So maybe in the long term, it will be toxic also for the control. But in this case, even if you have pH 4, the test is still valid. Yeah.
But when you say short-term test, how long was it, the risk exposure?
I think for the Raphidocelis, I don't have it in mind, I don't remember, but I think because, yeah, I will have to check, but so if the question is if the pH4 will also be toxic to the control, but this is why you have the control to see if the test will be valid.
But if they, for example, stop really growing, it really has an effect on the sensitivity. And if it's for 72 hours, it's already
The growth
done.
without the rare earth elements was not the same with the rare earth elements, of course.
Yeah, otherwise you would not have measured an effect, of
Ex-
course. But
exactly.
the question is, what you mentioned before, how much does it change sensitivity and hearing? So, and if it's a 72-hour test, it's already relatively...
For Vicia Faba, yes, I remember it is 72 hours. For Vida Celsa, don't remember. I don't remember the time.
Well, we can have a look into
Anyway,
it.
the title is the same like the slide of the paper. Yep.
One last question.
Yep.
So you mentioned that you measured the organic compounds like creatine.
I didn't hear, I'm sorry.
You mentioned that you measured the organic compounds. I'm just curious, like which kind of method you use.
Which compounds?
Organic, like the creatine.
Ah.
Like you measured 2 organic compounds, I think, from the.
Yeah, these ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which method?
For 1-hydroxypyran, we used HPLC.
HPLC, okay.
For creatinine, it was an extraction method. I don't remember exactly the procedure. Yeah. Yep.
I have a question for Giovanni. So in your last slides, you mentioned that rare earth element can have a positive effect on fertility and viability of embryos as well. Is it something that is already used nowadays in industry, for instance, or agronomy? Oh, I can come closer to you. It's okay. I have a question regarding your last slides. You mentioned that various elements can have a positive effect on fertility as well as the viability of embryos. And my question is there already practical application of this observation?
In China, it is a long-lasting use. Elsewhere in Europe, last year they have approved the use of a piglet feed additive. But there are many ongoing files at EFSA, European Food Safety Agency, in the direction of validating and approving the controlled use of rare earths in fertilizers and in livestock feed additives. It seems to work very well with piglets and with laying hens, but also in crops. So what we are waiting is a reality in China. It has been so for over 20 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I also have a question regarding this hormetic effect. Do you have already some idea of an explanation? Are you able to explain what happened maybe physiologically why you have this stimulation?
This is a long story. We may even go back to Hippocrates, because in pharmacy and in medicine, it has been well established for the last 25 centuries that est in dose venenum. There is in poison in the dose. Give much and you kill. Give little, and you heal. So it is not Calabrese's discovery. At the end of the 19th century, there was a school of medicine named after Arndt Schultz, which was just stressing the use of little amounts of pharmaceuticals to give improvements. Unfortunately enough, during the 20th century, the Arndt-Schultz theory was badly utilized by a school of pseudomedicine that included the use of very, very low concentrations of drugs, even going beyond the Avogadro number, which was the name of the School of Medicine.
Salerno.
No. I'm ashamed. It is a very well-known name, which now I don't remember.
Asman. This is
Never mind.
homeopathic.
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 The homeopathic school. They say that you do something good, even if you go with those 100 dilutions beyond the number of molecules that should be contained in 1 liter. So 30 100 dilutions go beyond the Avogadro number. And they are simply a mathematical absurd. But, independently of the homeopathic so-called doctors, a number of studies have come back during the 20th century, and a big merit has been addressed, must be addressed to Calabrese, working in the USA, although his name is Italian, who published a huge number of papers, including the concept that est in dose venenum. The poison is in the dosage. And we are after, I am a good personal friend of Calabrese. I saw him and I correspond with him. We have also published some little things together. We are on this line. Next week in Roini, we are just joking with 10 to the minus 7, 10 to the minus 8 molar to see if they oppose stimulatory effect to a inhibitory effect given by 10 to the minus 5th, 10 to the minus 4th. And as a consequence, as a practical consequence of what we were discussing a few minutes ago, Chinese farmers and Chinese growers have learned that small amounts of rare earths, they didn't even know the term rare earths, but that stuff could improve crop yield and livestock growth and egg laying.
Thank you, Giovanni. Look at that. It's time for the break. No, I don't know. Maybe we have some more questions. We have some time ahead of us because we finished a little early. So if you have more questions.
I have a question. I try to shout. With regard to this red mud deposit in Ireland. Come in, please. I'll just finish my question. Because we are going to